Hello again. It's now well into the 27th of May.
It is.
And yeah, we're going to do another one. We're on a roll.
We're on a roll.
We're on a roll. We're going to do another one before it's time to before
collapse.
we completely zonk out. Yes.
So.
And you said you were feeling revved up. You were ready to talk.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes.
I think we've covered quite a bit of...
We certainly have.
We've covered quite a bit of ground, and I think we've also managed to sort of talk about some stuff that we didn't sort of get to last time, which is good. But like what we were saying before, though, about the sort of the spiky kind of presentations of autism, I think because it's such a broad thing, I think it is something that you can kind of talk about for a long time. And still only feel like you've scratched the surface.
Yeah.
One thing I didn't mention, I don't think I mentioned it last time, so I'll mention it this time. I've had a project on the go for the last couple of years, sort of since diagnosis, to write a book about my experiences, and obviously lots of people have written books about it. And
About all sorts of things.
Yeah, I've made a little bit of progress, but I've not really kind of got as far with it as I would like. And I think one of the problems, well, probably the main problem I'm having with doing it and recording, my experiences, is that, how can I put this? Instead of having ideas for what kind of can be in the book or should be in the book, I have lots and lots of ideas about what could be in the book. All the different pathways that could kind of go off, and after a while it starts to feel dizzying. It feels almost like you're on a gigantic skyscraper and somebody's suddenly gone, hey, look down, and you do, and you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that, oh, I feel sick, kind of thing. And it's ironic, I think, that my desire to write a book about my autism diagnosis, the thing that's actually getting in the way more than anything, apart from obvious things like, lack of time, lack of concentration, lack of confidence, all that kind of stuff, is actually the autism itself, the way that I actually think about things. Because it's not that I don't think, I could write about... It's not that I don't think I could write, say, 150 pages or 200 pages about it. I'm sure I could. He gave me enough time. It's more that because I am as I am, and I think in the way I do, I can see so many possibilities that in the end I don't end up choosing any of them. In a funny sort of way.
That's interesting.
It's almost like a shutdown.
Yeah.
Almost like a shutdown.
Yeah.
So in a paradoxical kind of way, bizarrely, maybe I could write a better book about autism if I weren't actually autistic, but then it wouldn't be my experience anymore. It would be like a textbooky kind of thing.
Do you feel as well when you start writing something, you've kind of changed your status?
Yes, yeah. It sort of it almost makes it kind of seem more not real, but you feel as though in some way
you've gone from being a person who is not writing to a person who is writing, and that's like a change in your self-image almost, isn't it?
Yes, and just the actual act of sort of recording it and documenting it. Funnily enough, actually, one of my A-levels was sociology, and I really enjoyed it. I did it for degree as well, and wish I hadn't, but that's another story. But the teachers I had at A-level were great, and one of the things I always remember was that they were on about, basically, I won't bore anyone that's not into this stuff, but there was a guy in the 30s who did this groundbreaking piece of research into Chicago street gangs, and nobody really did this anymore. This is before TV or anything like that, and he basically went and managed to get accepted into the group. They knew what he was doing, they knew he was researching and everything. And over a long period of time, he earned their trust, and he basically almost followed them around and sort of, interviewed them and other things. And one of the guys who was one of the members of this said, he said, it's all very well you sort of following us around and taking an interest in us and stuff, but he said the trouble is that in the past I just used to do things. Now I have to think, what are you going to think about it?
Yeah.
And the funny sort of thing is, in a way, the same principle, this examination principle, comes in a funny sort of way, not just with my sort of potential book ideas, but you perhaps with this channel also, like if you didn't have this channel, you'd be living your life, wouldn't you, and doing what you do. I'm not saying the channel stops you from living your life, but do you not find that when things happen to you during the week?
Yeah, I do think. Oh, yeah, I ought to do a thing about that.
Yeah, and in a sense, it's sort of.
It's like I'm not entirely living for this channel or anything, but you know, I'm thinking quite often. Yeah, I should talk about that. Yeah.
So in a funny sort of way, just having it there kind of changes almost your. Not changes what you do necessarily. That's too much, but it has some kind of impact on on these kinds of things, because in a sense you're kind of doing an analysing. Yeah. Which we do anyway.
Although in a way I've been doing that for a very long time, because you know, as a child I used to keep a diary. Yes. And I used to be thinking all the time, what will I write in my diary tonight? Yeah. And then it went into blogging online when that was big. Yeah. Just LJ and things, and I was thinking, you know, when I was into posting on forums, you know, what could I post about to my forum mates, you know. So it's something that I have been it's just continuation of things that I have been doing. You know, a thought process that's been going on for many, many years. Yeah.
And it's interesting, I think, particularly though with autism, the fact that because there's so many components of it, you know, I suppose you could say it furnishes you with so many things that you could never be short of material. Yeah. But the question is whether or not it's something that you'd be comfortable sharing, whether you think other people would be interested in. That's something, funny enough, I think that's something we struggle with, right? Identifying your target audience, what are they into, you know, wouldn't people relate to this? And then once you've identified it, in a way trying to kind of narrow it down so that you get to the essence of it, all of these things are made harder by autism itself.
And in a way that's exactly why I'm making the channel. It's so I can talk about things that are on my mind that I want to get off my chest, that I'd like, thoughts that I want to verbalise. Yeah. But in such a way that I'm not bombarding people who don't want to be bombarded. Yeah. It's here in case anybody is interested. Yeah. And they can always click off if it's a bit boring for them. Yeah. And that's especially why I do the me and my spin things, because I just want to talk so much about, you know, whatever's been like the whole of my imagination. Yeah. But yeah, I don't have anyone to talk to about it. I know there's only so much that anyone can take about my latest hobby. So I put it on here. I can talk at the camera, you know, get it all out in the open, and then if anyone really likes that kind of thing, great. If they like hearing Autistic's info dump, there it is. If they're studying how it works, there it is. Yeah. If they find it informative or, you know, thought provoking in some way, you know, that's great as well. Yeah. No, fair enough. I completely you know, understand that. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I mean, and in a way as well, autism itself is a big spin.
Yes. It absolutely is. Yeah,
and it is, and it becomes, you know, overarching because it informs and colours everything you do. Yeah, everything else you think about.
Yeah, and it's so sort of broad as a thing that, you know, if you are sort of doing content creation based around it, there's so many things that you could kind of. I mean, I've read a couple. I'm not one of these people who sort of read millions of books about it, but during the course of my, let's say, the last few years, where I've been sort of seriously kind of looking at it, I would say I've probably read maybe a dozen, maybe just under a dozen books written by, you know, other autistic people, and the variety even within the small sample I've read is remarkable, because there's some that I've read that have been very chronological. It's been sort of, right, I'll talk about my childhood. This is some of the things you know, then I went to college or school, you know, college, and then, you know, I started the world of work, and then this, and then this. I've read some that have been very thematic. You know, it's been sort of divided into, you know, this section of my life, this, you know, sensory stuff, social stuff, other stuff. I've read some ones that don't even really seem to have much of a structure. It just seems to be kind of
Sort of stream of consciousness.
almost more stream of consciousness, yeah. And there isn't any right or wrong way of doing it. It's just simply, you know, what that person sort of was doing at that sort of time. But the whole thing about having it as a special interest or as a spin in itself, the thing that you know all these people had in sort of common was a desire to kind of capture something about how it feels to be you, some of the sort of the issues, shall we say, that you have, and also not even just the issues, but you know some of the positives as well, and to basically convey that to somebody else, whatever their motivation is for sort of reading it or you know or experiencing it. I suppose that's what it's about. It's trying to sort of do that. But sort of going back to the book thing, you know, assuming it ever gets written, so many people have sort of said to me, you know, that you know, there's potentially some sort of interest in there. You know, you've got this sort of the experience. I'm wondering if, in a funny sort of way, because you know, more people now are being diagnosed than previously. You know, the numbers are going up all the time. There's more and more people like us who are like diagnosed,
and there's more interest in it
and
as
there's
well.
more interest. Whether you know there'll come a point where you know, in a sense, the sort of the you know channels are saturated or whatever, but people will start to think, oh, for goodness sake, you know, there's so many you know books about it.
Peak autism.
Yeah, peak autism. I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking out loud, really.
Yeah.
But you do sort of wonder really whether you know it's possible to sort of have not too much information about something, but maybe it sort of feels a bit sort of glutted, shall we say. There's so much of it, it's kind of trying to find the bits that work for you.
Get autism fatigue.
Autism fatigue, absolutely. But when you were sort of saying, you know, like, you know, me and my spin, and you know, you can't sort of reasonably expect everybody to be as, you know, interested in something. I mean, maybe the same is true of just talking about, you know, autism full stop, you know, like...
even specific aspects of it, there's...
Even people who have... Either people who either are themselves or, you know, parents or something of you know, autistic children, people who have sort of a vested interest in it, maybe even they sort of feel that a little bit, you know, they sort of think, oh God, you know, there's so many blogs out there.
The market's a bit saturated.
There's so many books out there, there's so many media channels out there, there's so many Facebook groups out there, you know, there's so many Instagram posts out there, whatever else. In a sense, it becomes part of a wider problem to, you know, of our society in general, namely that there's too much sort of shouty...
Information overload.
Yeah, shouty, and it's difficult to kind of find your way to the good stuff, I guess. But sort of going back to what I was saying before, it's ironic that in my case, something that I would like to do, an ambition that I have, about something that's obviously had a big effect upon my life, is actually in a you know, perverse way being not thwarted, but as having obstacles put in the way by the thing itself.
Yeah.
There's a certain perverse irony to that.
Yes, it's meta.
Yeah, it is meta. It's very meta.
I couldn't even really define the word meta if I wanted to, but I find myself using it all the time. And everyone says, yes, it is. It's very meta.
Yeah. I think it's one of those things people... It's like postmodernism, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, people have an idea.
Yeah.
I have actually joked a few times that I would be absolutely brilliant at writing a book about how hard it is to write a book. If you wanted me to do that, write a book about how hard to write, I could do it. In fact, I could write you a film script about it. I'd have a fictionalised version of myself, right? So I've got a guy in his early 40s who's an ex-journalist who's discovered that that he's autistic when he's in late 30s. And let's say in this film version, he really wants to, you know, get this project off the ground, and his long-suffering, you know, partner, wife, whatever, is like, oh, for goodness sake, and it's literally like a week in the life, and he's like, no work gets done. It's just procrastination You know, I think. Oh God, this is going to sound really pretentious. Oh, good grief! I'm almost ashamed of myself. Have you ever seen Fellini's 8½?
No.
It's. I've only ever seen it the once. It's you know, film buffs out there will have seen it. It's a very good film, and it's literally about a guy who is a film director who's trying to make a movie, and basically the more time he spends on the project, the further away he kind of gets from the end result. And essentially it's a film about how hard it is to actually make a film.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets sillier and more surreal as it goes along. So yeah, something. But yeah, similar kind of concept. People who sort of go organise conferences about subjects, including autism, or who, you know, do keynote speeches or something, I think that's quite a remarkable thing, because they've obviously learned how to kind of take the ideas that they've got, simmer them down to the essentials, and have a bit more kind of focus.
Yeah.
And I do think to myself sometimes, well, they've been around, or they've been in the game longer than I have, so fair enough, they're kind of further down the path than me. Maybe I'll get there one day. But sometimes I do get quite frustrated with myself, and I think, oh, come on, you know, you've got some ideas, why don't you do something with them?
Yeah. You know, I haven't finished a novel since we're 14.
Have you not? What was the last one you read?
Oh no, not reading. I mean writing.
Writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I last finished writing a novel when I was 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the sort of plot of it? Was it?
It's about this girl, this 14-year-old girl, who she decides she's really fed up with school and she's going to go on strike.
Okay.
And then so she starts getting some of her classmates involved, and but it all gets blown up all out of all proportion, and these kind of completely go on a riot and smash up the school.
Ah, right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So, in terms of the sort of the sort of length of it, how sort of long was it?
I think well, I did it in 10-point type, single space, so it's quite crammed up. I think I got to 96 pages.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. So like a novella sort of thing. Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good. I've been
96 A4 pages on Word.
I've been creatively writing for as long as I can remember, but
I've started a lot of novels, but
never finished.
No, and I think about them all the time. I'm always thinking, I really ought to write that one. It doesn't happen.
You see, for me, my main thing is poems I can write. I've always written poems. They tend to come quite easily to me because I can just do them. Short stories, providing I have a little bit of planning, and I do usually require a little bit of planning, not excessive amounts, I'm alright. I wouldn't even be able to start something like that because it would just completely confound me. And it's for the same reason that I can't write the book, because there'd be so many, once I got on the original idea, there'd be so many subsequent ideas that would come. I want to do all of them.
Yeah.
I'd want to do all of them at once.
The subplots just have a mind of their own, don't they?
Yeah, I'd think, oh, this is good, oh, this is good, oh, that's good.
It's so easy just to get sidetracked.
And nothing would ever happen, that's the problem. The reason why I tend to find short stories are good to work with from a sort of, autistic creation point of view is that the thing with short stories, or the ones I write anyway, they tend to be based around one or two key ideas. Yeah. So providing you kind of nail that key idea or your key ideas, you're okay. Sometimes when I'm sort of doing them, I mean, sometimes I do go back in and put stuff in, but usually there comes a kind of point where you sort of stop and you're like, well, this would be if this were in a book, it would be the equivalent of 6 or 7 pages or something, a short story. But it does what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, about 3,000 words or so.
3,000 words or so, and that's fine. It does what it wants to do, and it disappears. There's, you don't have to sort of worry about, should I add more characters, should I add more colour, should I do this, it does what it wants to do.
And that's kind of what I like about writing fanfics as well.
Yeah.
Because it's a short story. It's for someone who is also a fan of this series, so you don't actually have to go into so much detail about, you know, what these characters look like and where they live, and because, you know, they know.
Yeah.
And, you know, you can just get on with some action.
Yeah.
This happens, they say this, they do that, they think the other.
Yeah.
And then it ends.
Yeah.
And, you know, anyone who's, you know, into the show will probably read it, and, yeah, I mean, they may or may not like it particularly, but, you know, it's got an audience.
Yeah. And
probably a very small audience, but, you know, it's got its audience who'll read it and maybe give you a comment saying, great, thanks.
And also, the thing is with fanfic...
And you're done.
Yeah. Fanfic actually lends itself quite well to autism, doesn't it? Because aside from the fact that you're writing from the point of view of you're exploring your particular spin in a particular thing, you also know, as you say, that the people who are reading it, chances are they're going to share that interest.
Yes.
They're going to know all the little sort of nuances and things.
It's almost like you're talking to them obliquely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you don't have to spend, as you say, the time kind of saying who. If you're writing about, say, Father Ted or something, you don't have to. You don't have to spend sort of time explaining who Father Ted is, because if you're reading this, you'll know who Father Ted is.
Yes.
You know who Dougal is and Jack and all the rest of it.
Yeah. You know what the house looks like. You know where they live.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got a sort of aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've seen the show, you know what it's about.
Yes.
So in a sense, it shortcuts all of that, doesn't it? And you can sort of just get onto the meaty business of actually having fun and doing stuff with the kind of characters.
Although, you know, I was kind of doing this crossover. It's on hold now because I started doing something else. It was Father Ted and the Foil Arms and Hog characters, Anna and Oisin. But I was kind of doing it from the point of view of Oisin.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of describing each of the Father Ted characters as he meets them, and each of the places on the island as he comes to them. Because I don't know, I think there's... Well, I don't know that necessarily people are interested in that, but it's something that I want to try and describe. You know, if you're actually going to Craggy Island as a newcomer, what would you see? What would you think when you saw these people? Yeah,
what would be your sort of impressions of them? Yeah, and it's a sort of good way of sort of coming at it, isn't it? From that sort of point of view.
Yeah.
And also because like anybody who reads it who's interested in the sort of show will sort of have their opinions of the characters, you know, things that they like about them and find them, you know, fun to kind of watch or whatever. So it'd be interesting seeing like from the eyes of somebody else.
Yeah.
What that's about. You know, but I do wonder actually, in all seriousness, with sort of fan fiction, if there's something about it that, or certain styles of writing actually, not just fan fiction, that do lend themselves quite well to you know autistic creators, because there's things about them that just kind of sit nicely with things that we're good at.
I mean, more broadly in life as well. I was thinking the other day, now, how have I come to know so many autistic people? Why they draw? And I thought that, you know, all the places that I meet friends, you know, the people around me, you know, from home ed groups and being involved in, you know, far left political activism, and from being on fan fiction websites and, you know, other fan sites and things.
Yeah.
I do autistic stuff with the autistics.
Yeah, it's true. And I suppose also, I don't know, maybe this is a slightly more kind of abstract-y kind of thing, but maybe some of the traits that we kind of have kind of make us appealing to people with similar kinds of traits.
Yeah,
I mean, this
you're
is,
like me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, birds of a feather and all that kind of thing. But, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm quite good at spotting the other socially awkward person in the group. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that we'll always get on like a house on fire, but quite often, like if I'm in a sort of social situation and I sort of see someone who's obviously, you know, not fully comfortable, I'll often gravitate towards them. Yeah. You know, for that.
I mean, not necessarily because I want to look after them or anything, but because they're just more appealing to be around than someone who's loud.
Yeah, exactly so. Yeah. Or there's been occasions actually where I've kind of come across somebody's you know, content or something, whether it's been on a blog or something, and it's really appealed to me. And I've kind of, you know, thrown them a, you know, said, oh, that's great, and you know they've sort of responded, and then we find out we actually have other things in common. So whether sort of with autism, for example, it, you know, if this is something that sort of resonates with you because you yourself are, and somebody has, similar, they've got special interests in things that you also have, that you find that, it's a whole sort of worldview that you can kind of see it from their point of view, they can kind of see it from yours in a sense. So even if you don't necessarily, with the fan fiction thing, even if you're not necessarily into everything that they're into, there's enough there to kind of connect you in some sort of way. I didn't express that very well, but you in a sort of loose.
I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, sort of a loose sort of sense. But it would. I mean, obviously, there's probably no research on this, but it would be very, very interesting to know. If there is a correlation between fan fiction, for example, and and autism, whether to what extent there is an overlap, because I'll bet if you were to do a Venn diagram, you'd find there was probably quite a significant. Doesn't mean all fan fiction creators are.
Oh, fan art generally.
Or fan art generally, but I do wonder, and I suppose the fan art thing is actually interesting because. I've actually found over the years that.
I mean, you do your Lego dioramas, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Batman Lego things.
I was just thinking about that. I got back into Lego when I was on lockdown, and I basically sort of started off quite small, making models and things. I used to do it when I was a kid, and I built myself over the course of the years. I built myself a sort of Lego Batcave, and the interesting thing is that, like, for inspiration, I had a look online to see pictures, and some of the stuff that people have built is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's amazing stuff, and it's not just having the money and the resources, that's part of it, but just the sheer imagination that's gone into it. And to be honest, to do something like that, you have to be quite obsessive, because sitting at a table for hours on end, kind of trying to manipulate bricks into place and things, that requires a certain amount of patience.
It does, yeah.
So unless you really kind of dig Batman, for instance, or the Batcave, or whatever it is you're doing, you're not going to have the patience to do it. So the whole thing about there being a correlation between these things, you can kind of see it, can't you?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing a fan fiction piece, do you sometimes find that you can spend quite a lot of time on it, and it can be quite. Yeah.
I mean, some I write. I just think, right, I've got this idea, I'm going to write it, and then 2 hours later it's done.
Yeah.
So some of them do go on and on. Some of them I think I have an idea, and I start writing it, and it gets a lot longer than I imagined.
Yeah.
Like the one I was talking about earlier, where Anna and Nasheen go to Craggy Island. It's getting longer and longer. I had this idea for a plot, but it seems to be quite a lot bigger than it was. And I think I estimated it to be about 6 chapters originally. I'm now up to 6. We're not even halfway through.
Yeah.
It's getting huge.
It's funny. I think last time we were sort of talking about famous people in history with who and a name that often comes up, of course, is Leonardo da Vinci, and he was notorious for never finishing projects.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you wonder, like speculatively, maybe he's the kind of uber example, assuming he was autistic. I'm taking it, but maybe that's the he's the poster child for this, like in a sort of sense, like the guy who has so many ideas, but he sort of starts something and breaks off and does something else and does something else, and the obsessive detail is always there, but projects kind of seem to enlarge and go on and
get very big,
get very sort of large, and
actually for the Foil Arms and Hog fanfic competition, which it closed a couple of weeks ago, and it's the voting stage now. That was one where I had an idea and I wrote it. And, I just wrote it, just a couple of hours. It was one evening's work, put the kids to bed. Right, I'll get some writing done. Oh, it's finished.
Yeah.
And it just sort of appeared in my head fully formed. But then what happened afterwards was, I thought, I started thinking, what happens to these characters afterwards, though? And I'm up to chapter 4 so far. And again, it's not even halfway through.
Hmm.
But I've got carried away with it. You know, every time I get a bit of time to myself, I'm typing.
And you can just add and add and add.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got an end point in sight. I know what's going to happen. I'm building up to a crescendo and then an end. But yeah, it's turned out a lot longer than I thought it would.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just sort of and in a way, it sort of represents kind of the interest in the sort of the spin itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
That
and how engaged you are with these characters.
How engaged you are with them, and also the fact that there's no real telling as to where it will actually take you.
Yeah.
Because people have all kinds of sort of levels of sort of interest in different things, but potentially, I mean, some spins are quite short-lived, aren't they? I mean, you've done spins videos, but there are some that the nature of them, the sort of the interest can sort of last you a long time, years, maybe even decades, depending on what it is. So
or you have sort of broad themes that keep coming up.
Keep coming up. So it's quite an unpredictable thing, isn't it?
It is,
once you roll the dice on it, there's no kind of telling where it sort of comes to. I mean, you hear sort of stories, don't you, of people who have a very specific kind of interest in something. Like they're particularly interested in certain kinds of transport, buses or something, or whatever, and they literally spend all this time kind of wanting to sort of go around and find this particular thing, and
like train spotters,
or people who visit football stadiums or whatever. Doesn't mean that
collectors.
Doesn't mean that they're all autistic necessarily, but it does. There is an overlap. To go back to the Venn diagram thing.
It's one of those things you can imagine. There's a disproportionate amount of autistics among them.
Yes. Yeah. Relatively speaking, and maybe also what we're sort of going back to the kind of the sort of the society, not really making kind of as many changes as we would like. I think probably a lot of it is, some of it anyway, is perhaps that it provides a sort of an element of safety and predictability,
and also escapism.
In a world that often can stress you out in other areas.
Yeah.
So providing you're not kind of spending literally every minute of every day kind of doing it, and you're doing sort of other things, it's good to have these kinds of things that they're sort of providing a kind of a healthy kind of release. I mean, I don't know, for example, that my life would necessarily crash and burn if I didn't have my sort of outlets that I have.
Yeah, your Lego and so on.
Yeah, I don't know for 100% sure that it would crash and burn. I mean, I might find something else, but I know for one, I know it would certainly be a lot tougher, and it would be a lot kind of harder because when I went and had difficult experiences or bad days or something, I wouldn't have that to fall back on.
Yeah, you wouldn't have that to cheer you up.
Yeah, and not
it's like having a nice cup of tea.
It is like having a nice cup of tea. I even did it today. When I was on my way down to see you, I got stuck in traffic, which I wasn't expecting at that late stage, and I find myself mentally going through. A couple of days earlier, I'd watched a thing about the Nightmare on Elm Street series, so I found myself. I'm a horror fan, so I found myself thinking about the different characters in each one, thinking, how good was this character? How well written were they? How well acted were they? And all this kind of stuff.
Where would I put them on a political spectrum?
Yeah, that sort of thing, and just sort of working my way through. And it was fine because it rather than getting it sort of annoyed and frustrated, it actually helped. It actually helped keep me sort of more calm.
Yeah, it's a distraction, isn't it?
It's a distraction.
It occupies your mind.
Yeah, so and if I hadn't been doing that, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily have flipped out, but it would certainly have wound me up a lot more than it did. So that's quite interesting actually. The sort of nature of spins, and interest like fan fiction and stuff, as a sort of mental health thing as well.
Yeah.
Helping.
Though on the flip side, of course, if you can't have that time to sit and think about your spin,
Yes.
or to engage with it in some way, then
Yeah.
then you get frustrated.
Then you get frustrated. Yeah.
Yeah.
And trying to explain to other people why it's important to you is quite hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, something I must mention, by the way, and this is slightly off topic, and I'm so glad I thought of this. Do you remember last year when we were we did the video and we were on about fictional characters? Do you remember me saying that Dylan from Casualty, I suspect he has autism? They're doing a story in which he's going for an autism assessment, which is currently on TV.
Oh, wow, great.
Yes, so I'm just, in a rare moment of, well, who am I kidding, smugness.
Well, I hope it's great.
Yeah.
It may not be, it may be awful, but we'll cross our fingers. We'll assume it will be great.
My partner is an avid Casualty watcher, and whenever there's an interesting story on, she'll always tell me about it. And
I'm just amazed it's still on.
what was
when I used to watch it.
What was nice about it was the guy who basically is his current boss. For those who don't know, it's a long-running UK medical series for anyone that's abroad or whatever.
Hospital drama.
Hospital drama. Dylan is a doctor, obviously.
Setting Casualty.
Setting Casualty.
Yeah, it's kind of a bit like Trumpton, except instead of a fire engine, there's a casualty ward.
There's casualty ward.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that the people who've written it have obviously done a bit of research and homework, which is nice, because the guy who is his current boss basically uses the term Asperger syndrome. And Dylan shoots back with, well, one thing, nobody calls it that anymore because, and he explains about how it's no longer an official diagnosis. And secondly, he mentions about Hans Asperger being a Nazi. And I thought, well, yeah, okay, in the end of the day, it's a mainstream TV show. It's, soap opera kind of drama series about... Yeah. But it's nice that they actually got that detail right.
It is, yeah.
They actually bothered to do some research and fair play.
Yeah.
Fair play.
Yeah, so it's promising. It's promising.
So it's promising. So yes, I'm glad I suddenly thought to mention that. But we are seeing an increasing number actually in of characters these days, aren't we? In drama series.
Who you mean who are expressly autistic or who?
Both.
Appear to be? Yeah,
Both. Because I remember last time you were mentioning about the bridge and saying how sort of wasn't great. I didn't watch it myself, but I know a few people mention it. But I don't know whether I've ever mentioned this, but years and years and years ago, when in fact, I think I was at primary school at the time. The very first character I ever came across in a work of fiction, who was I think I'm right in saying this. I'm sorry if I'm not. You can shout at me in the comments. Was explicitly autistic. It was a lad in a film called The Boy Who Could Fly. And literally it's about that. It's about a lad who's autistic who has the power to fly. Now, I know. Now, I was about 8 when I watched it, or 7 or 8 or something. Yeah. At the time, I remember thinking it was quite charming and all the rest of it. But honestly, people talk about Rain Man. And the Raymond character is is not it's this conflation of autism and savantism. But honestly, we've come on a long way since the 80s, haven't we? Can you fly?
I've never actually tried.
No, I haven't either. I've never tried to fly. Maybe.
Well, they said in Hitchhiker's Guide you throw yourself at the ground and miss.
Miss, yeah.
But every time I've tripped over,
You've always
bumped myself.
Yeah, the last time I fell down my stairs, which thankfully was a few years ago, I did fly in the sense that I went from the top to the bottom in a short time, but I hit the stairs going down. So
you're not supposed to do that.
Not supposed to do that.
You're supposed to miss.
Yeah, you're supposed to miss. So yeah.
I actually had a dream the other night. I dreamed that I took some hallucinogenics and then thought I could fly.
Do you remember the old?
So I never need to take hallucinogenics, right? I've tried it in my dream.
Well, it's like the old graffiti, isn't it? I don't know if you ever had this anywhere in your school, but I think ours had, what was it? Don't drink and drive, take drugs and fly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good old. The old ones are the best, aren't they?
Yeah.
But
not necessarily.
No, probably not. Some humour should be kind of thing. But yeah. So yeah, they're doing the storyline in Casualty, so that's good. So awareness through medical drama.
That's positive. Yeah, gets thumbs up.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that's quietly encouraging.
Yes. Have we come to a natural end?
I think probably
It is. It is. We are coming up to 40 minutes.
Yeah. I think we've done good.
Should we call it a night?
Let's call it a night.
Let's call it a night. I'm sure you can come back again next year.
We can.
If you think of anything else.
We haven't exhausted everything.